This is UFO Contact from the Pleiades, Wendell Stevens, Chapter 5, Aboard the Mothership, Part 2. The group thought they now had the photo proofs they wanted. The film was sent for, and when the package arrived and it was opened, they were all crushed to see that every picture made using the special viewing screen with both Meyer's camera and the second similar one used by Semjase were grossly overexposed and light to the point of losing nearly all the image in the pictures. They were so bad that they were not even reproducible. The other pictures taken aboard the ships without using the device had wavy flashes of color shot through them, and were also distorted, and all but useless as well. Most were also overexposed, evidently due to the properties of the light aboard. Well, I don't accept this, folks. I'm sorry. If they can fly from one galaxy to the next and they can fly in hyperspace, they certainly have the ability to produce images, and they could have given him a picture of anything. They could have given him a stack of pictures that were all perfect. Any picture he wanted. And we have never seen life on another planet. We never saw their cities. And by now we should have seen those things. And I wonder why we haven't. We've had so many visitors on this planet. Why haven't we ever seen a photograph of them on their own planet? I want to see what kind of houses they live in. What are their city streets like? What are their trees and fruits and vegetables like? What are their animals like? We've never seen this. Why? That's a big question. Another problem was also noted now that the pictures were back. The 49 millimeter, slightly wider than normal angle of spread of the lens on Meyer's camera was too wide to get close-up shots of the images in the special viewing screen, and even worse, with the smaller normal viewing screens without getting the edges of the screen in the picture also. And he had problems with the focus. So we're going to blame all this on Billy Meyer's photography experience? Well, I'm sorry, but that does not fly. Semjase, Ptah, and Quetzal have robots that could take pictures. They would have all photography that was ever known by them in his head and be able to recall all of these skills, and there's just no excuse for not having pictures. So I don't know what's going on here, but I don't like this. The next sentence. The disappointment was disheartening, and Meyer was forced to resort to collecting other images to illustrate what he was trying to describe, including observatory pictures of some of the stellar wonders. You mean in all of the banks of memory on board those ships, they could not give him some pictures of these stars? They would not have a catalog of them? They would not have encyclopedias full of pictures? I don't buy it. Some of these were mounted in the picture albums by his friends, who kept them up, and eventually became confused by others as the pictures from the trip. In fact, that is what we were once told by somebody there also, which we knew was not true, because those views are only possible from the point in space occupied by the Earth, and even then through special hydrogen and other filters not available for small cameras. Meyer communicated his disappointment to Semjase, who later picked up the diapositives for their scientists to look to see what could be done to improve the effort. Those were never brought back to Meyer. You know, these aliens have such good memories. They have the use of computers to help them remember everything. You would think that she would remember to either bring them back or tell him what happened. They were unable to improve them. But they didn't do either. And that raises a question. Why? Were they behind the spoiled photos? Did somebody decide that human beings from Earth were not ready for images taken from the ships in a position that's 500 light years away? Because that would be absolute proof if anyone accepted the position of those stars, because we have only one perspective, and that's from Earth. We don't have any pictures 500 light years away. There's a clue here in the photographs. Why weren't those diapositives returned, or explained why they weren't returned? The author provides no satisfactory answer. He just says, those were never brought back to Meyer, and he leaves it there. He was a good friend of Meyer. He was writing a book. He could have asked Meyer, did Semjase tell you what happened to those photos? Maybe Semjase told him, there's nothing we can do to those photos, and Billy forgot. Billy's allowed to forget. He's a human. He doesn't have the help of those computers. And if Billy Meyer can't take a picture, he probably can't remember either. I'm real curious about this diapositives incident. Let's go on to the next paragraph. Another problem was the one experienced before with the disappearance of spacecraft photos. Now there's another clue. We have spacecraft photos that are vanishing. So was this monkeying around with the photos done at the Photoshop or by those entities who don't want those photos to be developed? Would they pay off somebody at the Photoshop to ruin them? Or would they bring along equipment and ruin them without the knowledge of the Photoshop? If so, how would they be specific to those particular photos? Anyway, these are the thoughts that occur to me as I read these sentences. Next sentence. Here again, most of the photos made aboard the mothership, not using the special screen, were lost in the processing line of handling from laboratory back to Meyer, and he never saw them. Those would have been the best ones. Some frames came back completely black. Now, how could that happen? Completely white, yes. I believe there's a process where you can overexpose film just by hitting it with some kind of radiation. But coming back completely black, which means no exposure whatsoever on those silver plates or whatever is inside of a camera. I think there's a little mouse in there, and he paints the picture when he looks through the hole. Only the few pictures that were on the other rolls, together with pictures through the special viewing device, ever came back to Meyer. Very little of the photographic efforts aboard the Great Spacer survived today, and what does is of little value for analysis. Randall Winters put on some presentations, and he had copies of Billy Meyer's photos, and they were not good. Somebody doesn't know how to run a camera, or someone has a lousy camera. I'm not sure. The transmission of the trip notes was resumed in the 32nd contact at 14:16, which is a quarter after 2, on the 8th of September 1975, as a thought transmission contact, called by Meyer to settle some problems he was having with the notes on the big trip. I have a question here. If she's in the Pleiades, 500 light years from here, and he sends her a thought, does it go to her instantly? I don't remember reading anything that would answer that question. But I believe that thought is transferred instantly, like gravity. Semjase was busy and unable to engage in any very long contact, and asked Meyer to hold off until the next day when she would have more time. The contact was reopened on the 9th of September 1975. The discussion concerned a number of matters which Meyer was not allowed to reveal to any other people. Ooh, I'd like to know what that was all about. He was advised of a series of events that would transpire, involving him and also others of our world. Wow. The reason for secrecy was to avoid influencing the events and thus the course of evolutionary patterns already cast. I'd like to know more about that. How does that work? He was given the information so as to be able to measure our position in event time, which is not the same as clock time. Well, you lost me there. Event time, which is not the same as clock time. Is that why the aliens can't tell us precisely when something is going to happen? Because they told us many things would happen, and it did not happen for decades. but it did happen. I can't think of any examples. These notes also reviewed a discussion of religions and the real spiritual nature of Earth humans at this position in time. A discussion of parallel worlds in both super and suborder dimensions and their effect on our world, normal to us at this time, was also reviewed for the notes. Well, that's the kind of stuff I want to know more about. Parallel worlds. A discussion of efforts by Earth powers to create ships similar to those of the extraterrestrials observed in our skies was also reviewed. So are they ready to give us technology? The 33rd contact on Friday, the 12th of September 1975, was the first face-to-face meeting since the extended trip, and it took place at 10:57 in the morning after urgent calls by Meyer for a contact. Semyasi says, "Yesterday you tried several times to call me. Unfortunately, I could not respond because there were some very important things to do which could not be postponed." Meyer says, "This I found out as you just warded me off. What had you to do that was so important, as I well had something important appearing so for me? Namely, on the night of Wednesday, the 10th of September, at 20:45 hours, now that would be 8:45, so it's 8:45, southwest of Hinwil, Switzerland. We saw a very great oranged color, luminous flying object. Object? No, object. Seen from my house, it was about 1.2 to 1.4 meters apparent size in diameter, and without any doubt it was a spherical formation. After a few minutes the object disappeared in a black and evidently artificial cloud. At 21:45, that would be 9:45, 9:45, I could see the object again in the southeast. The light of the object was this time very intense, and the sky had a very peculiar violet-red-blue color. Enough light was generated that I could film the object while it jumped around like a jack-o'-lantern. I didn't know that jack-o'-lanterns jumped around, but this one sure did. Then it suddenly sank down very steep in the area near Bachtelberg, and there it simply hung in the air. This also I was able to film. Well, Billy is a pretty good photographer now, and he was able to film these things. Then it shot off like a missile toward the east, returned again rapidly to very close, and started to pulse a very intense light. The peculiar color of the sky faded, and then the object jumped around again like crazy. Soon I was able to film it while it disappeared from my viewer frame. Twice more I got it in the camera field and filmed it again. I only hope the film comes out well, which I will tell you when it is developed. What I'm wondering is, was this object a beam ship? Was it one of yours? Why did you demonstrate so openly over town if it was one of yours? Because it could be seen as well by others. Or was it a strange object? And why do you suddenly fly around here with such big ships? It's 1.2 meters? It must mean kilometers. And why do you suddenly fly around here with such big ships when you told me that the great ones would only come here in an emergency? So this must be... Okay, the next sentence addresses the issue of size. The object would have to be at least 600 to 700 meters in diameter if I have estimated the distance from me to the ship right, which was at the farthest about 20 kilometers. Last night I saw the object again at 9:00 p.m. when it hung very far away in the air near the mountain we call the blank. This mountain is seen from my house in the southwest direction. What about this object? And why do you just swoop along here in the environment with it? Semyasi says, it was just concerning this. I don't know what that means. We were so much occupied by the object seen by you that I could not speak with you. I had to tell you to wait. The yesterday and before yesterday object was the same, which you had already seen in the evening of the 20th of April and photographed. This was not a beam ship, as we say, but a small spacer type. Also, it does not belong to us, but to rather unkind intelligences. Ooh. They are very interested in our work, and for some time they have been interested in you, for they want to kidnap you. Oh, chilling! These intelligences intend to bring Earth and Earthmen under their control. That is chilling. For this they do not shrink from kidnapping. It is one of the groups who operate through Earth religions and find success in this. Wow. Now I'm dying to know what she means by unkind intelligences. Wow. Lacerda warned us about the species that were here around 2000. There were 14 species, and she said 3 of them are hostile, and that one of the 3 was doing business with our government. The conversation then turned to events in the Bermuda Triangle and the reports of strange things happening there. Semyasi observed that some of the strange events had a natural origin, but acknowledged that not all were really natural. Her biggest concern, though, was our unnatural employment of atomic energy and its dangers to all life here. These extraterrestrials are not the ones to express such concerns, however, and the damage to our ionosphere by chlorofluorocarbons pales in comparison to that caused by radiation energies from atomic explosions. Now, I don't know what this means. It says in big letters, and from another source, not from Meyer. Okay, so the author is Wendell Stevens, and he interviews people who have had UFO contact all over the world, and then he writes books about them. And so he's giving us something that's not a Meyer information piece. There are other more serious conditions produced by man which are having an even greater destructive effect on our ionosphere, which may already be irreparably out of control. A UFO contactee in Minnesota, who also is told by his entirely human extraterrestrial visitors that they are coming from what we call the Pleiades, who has been visited by them since his first abduction in 1958, has carried on extensive dialogues on scientific and technical subjects so profound that he had to enroll in college physics courses to learn enough to grasp what they were trying to explain to him. Well, I'm sure that student stood up in class and says, I've been contacted by aliens from the Pleiades, and they're teaching me things, and that's why I'm here in this class. People in the class are saying, whoa, dude, tell me about it. They told him that our toying with the atom was our greatest danger, and worse, our scientists had no knowledge of the dangers that we are introducing into our world. At the suggestion of those extraterrestrials, he produced a monograph on nuclear energy versus planet Earth, and sought to bring it to the attention of science circles and open minds wherever he could. And to give this emphasis, the ETs told him in advance what our survey team sent to the South Pole to study the recently discovered hole in the ionosphere over the Antarctic would find. This monograph was written in August 1986 as a team was being prepared for the expedition to the Antarctic to find out what is causing the hole discovered by the IRAS satellite, IRAS, infrared astronomical satellite, in 1979 and growing. A copy of that monograph is reproduced following this page for your review. We have also included a copy of the letter transmitting this monograph to us, so you can see for yourself that we have received our copy weeks after the first ones were sent out. What astounded us was the earlier evidence that the Pleiadians visiting Switzerland had explained the same destructive effect of our atomic explosions to Meyer in 1978 in an uncirculated dialogue of the dangers of our atomic sciences in the hands of people who did not know enough about what they were doing to be safe. They cautioned that we may already have gone too far and signed our suicide note. They explained, in effect, that the radiation particles produced by our fission and fusion reactions are only the gross result of the disarrangement in mass, but that far more serious is the permanent and ever-growing imbalance in the still undiscovered particles and force in the deranged atom and its effect on its neighbors, constantly growing in matter like a cancer. Wow! Wow! For what Meyer was told in this respect, refer back to the notes of his 35th contact presented here on page 148 and subsequent. As was expected, the team sent to the South Pole came to no conclusions. And even more important, our predicted holes at the North Pole were also discovered by the TOMS, T-O-M-S satellite late in 1986. Further on, the extraterrestrials' suggestion of the contactees produced monograph on nuclear energy versus planet Earth. And now I guess we're going to plunge right into nuclear energy and planet Earth. Nuclear fission and fusion, as employed today for energy production and military uses, are killing this planet. And no one in the scientific community has any idea why it's dying or how to save it. The reason for this is simple. They do not understand atomic structure, solar structure, or the complete dynamics of falling bodies. That's terrible. I thought fusion reactions were safe. The splitting of the atom gave off the gamma rays and the deadly rays, but the fusion was not supposed to be deadly. This is not good. Very sad. Physics textbooks erroneously declare our sun to be, in effect, a nuclear reactor. In 1975, we didn't know that, but today, I think many people are moving towards the electrical universe, and this nuclear reactor business is dying out as a theory. So, the sun is not a nuclear reactor. Because the scientific community feels confident that nuclear power is a part of nature, they as a body have ceased to consider the possibility that perhaps they do not have all the answers. Due to this arrogance, they are not even looking at nuclear technologies as possible causes of the damage we see occurring to our ionosphere, and if they do not look, they will not see. Our planet is very sick and is weakening daily. It has reached a point where Earth's own mechanisms can no longer heal the wounds as quickly as they are being inflicted. In other words, we have reached a point of no return in that if nuclear fission and fusion are not abandoned and salvage operations begun immediately, the ionosphere will continue its rapid disintegration until life on Earth ceases to exist. In this paper we will attempt to explain in brief what is happening and why, but most particularly we aim to warn the reader of what the future holds if this insanity is not stopped, and soon. Well, the method they have chosen is to tell Billy, and have Billy with his 6th grade education tell scientists. Now, that is information flowing uphill, if you ask me. If I was a species that had flown across the galaxy, 500 light years to get here, I would certainly know that that is not the correct approach. If these people learned how to fly across the galaxy, With that kind of reasoning, it must have taken them 100 million years more than it would take me, because I can see right away that this approach will not work. I don't think it's necessary to go to our leaders because they are totally corrupt. And any alien who lands here who has the sense to cross the galaxy would notice right away that our leaders are corrupt and they're leading us all down the wrong road. True leadership is leading us down the right road, being wise enough as a leader to know the right road from the wrong road. And our leaders are very stupid. They have a lot of money and a lot of power, and they have no intelligence. They don't see the big picture. They're screwing up our atmosphere as a result. And if I was an alien, I would call a press conference, because the news media, some people with cameras are common people with an above average skill. Announce this meeting, have all the people meet there, and if it's safe, beam those people aboard the ship and take them out into space so that the backdrop is the planet Earth. So there will be no question that these people were on a saucer. And make the ship big enough to accommodate everybody. And since these aliens can read minds and they know what you're thinking, they can hear your thoughts, they're not going to have any detractors in the group. If there's a detractor in the group, you beam him to a shuttle ship and he's carried back to Earth and released. No thanks, we don't need you. Now, if you aliens are listening to my thoughts right now, take heed. This is a better method. What the people need, the common people need, is some video. And it doesn't matter if you speak to us directly or if you speak through Billy Meyer or someone else. But you have to do something impressive. If this is a serious matter, and it seems like the writer considers it of extreme importance. Okay, back to the text. Our emphasis must be on predictions because, frankly, the tests and results upon which we base our theory break many currently accepted laws of physics, and so we will be rejected out of hand by many of those who have spent their lives properly memorizing those laws. To prove we are credible and do indeed know what we're talking about, we must therefore predict what the scientific community has not predicted and can never explain using current physical law. And I have a comment to add here. As soon as any alien group noticed that we were screwing around with atomic weapons and atomic energy, they should have provided us with the additional information that we need to understand the danger. All it would take is thought transfer, telepathic thought transfer to one scientist like a Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, or someone who has the ability to understand it and bring it to the public. And then that scientist can explain the theory, other scientists can confirm it, and then he can explain why it's a bad idea to use fusion and fission. Last paragraph says, only in this way can we impress the reader with the truth of what we say and gain allies in our effort to halt these deadly technologies before it's too late. So then, to begin, the process of nuclear fission. Now, fission is splitting the atom, and it's typically done with uranium. During the process of nuclear fission and fusion is putting two atoms together like hydrogen to form one helium. An atom is forced to open and electrons escape. Science and industry assure us that this process is safe because even though our knowledge of atomic structure is incomplete, any unforeseen damaging effects are prevented by the massive steel and concrete containment vessels. Well, anybody can see that that's wrong. If we don't understand all the details of these subparticles, then we don't really understand the whole process, and safety is here not understood as well. Next paragraph. They are correct insofar as containing electrons is concerned, but what they have yet to realize is there exists much smaller particles of mass and energy, which pass easily through the containment walls, and which strip off particles from containment vessels themselves as they pass through. So in other words, they're weakening the containment vessels as time progresses. And our government knew this in 1975. They had to. They were spying on Billy Meyer. They had to know it. And if they didn't know it, by the time Wendell Stevens published the book, they have no more excuses. At the same time that this book is being written and the aliens from the Pleiades are communicating these warnings, inventors are inventing free energy devices that tap into zero-point energy. And our leaders, because they're selfish and greedy, and they want profits so they can live well in a material world, are killing inventors, suppressing their inventions, seizing them and issuing gag orders. That's the kind of leadership we have. All governments are bad. They get power and then they become corrupted. Power corrupts, and the solution is to disperse power. Instead of having one United States superpower, you divide it up into 50 states, because 50 individual countries is less threatening to the world than one gigantic superpower that can march into any country like Iraq and steal the oil, or Afghanistan and murder the innocent people and then grow heroin in the poppy fields there and have U.S. soldiers guard them. We don't need to have U.S. soldiers doing that. I would rather see U.S. soldiers planting food for the hungry to eat and stockpiling it if necessary. Instead, they're growing heroin and selling it on American streets to children and their teens, ensuring that they will have a drug addict life. This is wrong, and to poison the well of the CIA for doing this, we have to spread the truth. Now I'm down to the last 10 cards on this chapter, and the author is forcing me to read to you about nuclear fission and fusion with warnings that are misplaced and falling on deaf ears. Because here we are 37 years later, 2012, and nothing has been done to even roll back nuclear fission and fusion. And there are no excuses for government. Those nuclear power plants make them a lot of money, and that's why they do it. They sell out mankind. They destroy our ionosphere. And when anybody does something that threatens the entire species, you have to consider them madmen. They are more dangerous than Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini put together. Next card. This results in an unforeseen and rapid decay of the containment structure itself, weakening it greatly within a decade, which in turn allows even larger particles, still smaller than an electron, to escape. Obviously, the problem quickly becomes progressive. These minute particles released from an atom are negative in respect to planet Earth. This means these particles will be repelled from Earth's surface to the outer regions of the ionosphere. Of course, these particles, yet more negative in value than solar energy, and are also repelled from the energy emitted by the sun. Because these very negative particles are repelled from solar energy, they move around the Earth, staying on the dark side of the planet in order to avoid direct contact with solar energy. Well, that would explain why there would be a large opening on the darkest side of the planet. That would be the winter at the poles. These very negative particles tend to settle in at any location which remains in darkness for substantial periods of time. What did I just say? For a part of the year, this area is at the southern polar region, Antarctica, accumulating at the South Pole. These particles assemble themselves with the normally positive ions of the ionosphere, which results in the production of an extremely negative plasma. As the South Pole again begins to face toward the Sun, September through October, this highly negative plasma is repelled and now has nowhere to go but to Earth. This results in a hole in the ionosphere in the South Pole region. Because of the massive amounts of these very negative particles being released, the hole in the ionosphere will be found to have increased dramatically in size in 1986, possibly as far as the 600 parallel line. If the phenomena is monitored, it will be noticed that the hole will develop a 24-hour oscillation, and that the oscillation will always be away from the sun's light. This again is due to the fact that these very negative particles, now assembled into a very negative plasma, will be repelled from solar energy. As the South Pole faces towards the Sun, the North Pole lies in darkness. Therefore, the negative, unassembled particles in the upper atmosphere will tend to settle in near the North Pole and will assemble with the positive ions there. When once again the North Pole faces toward the Sun, the resulting negative plasma will be forced to the surface of the Earth. Our calculations indicate that in the early months of 1987, a hole in the ionosphere will be found to have appeared over the North Pole. Some of the results of this disruption of the ionosphere will have immediate effects. For instance, as great shells of this negative plasma are pushed into existing shells of plasma, very adverse and abnormal weather conditions will be experienced worldwide. Worldwide! In areas where the ionosphere is thicker, there will be an overfiltering of solar energy, causing a reduction of sunlight available on Earth and a subsequent increase in rainfall. In areas where the ionosphere has thinned, expect severe heat waves and drought conditions. So that's what's changing the weather. Everybody thinks it's HAARP. These guys in government are covering up. They're lying to us. They're leading us to think that it's HAARP. And who understands the subatomic particles well enough to know what's really going on according to this group of aliens? Well, you and me. Now it's up to you and me to spread the word. I'm recording a video, which is fascinating reading to anyone interested in UFOs and aliens. And what you could do to help us is copy the video and post it on your own channel, or post it on other channels elsewhere on the internet, because I did not copyright my work. Most of my videos are my opinions, and you are certainly welcome to my opinions. No royalties necessary, no credit need be given to me. I don't want credit. I want truth. Next card. Also, iron deposits attract these negative particles of mass and energy, and so areas with large deposits of iron can expect drastic changes in their weather cycles. A less immediate effect of this attraction to iron deposits will be that life forms in these areas will experience genetic changes, and an alarming increase in birth defects will be seen in these areas. Likewise, incidents of cancer and other diseases related to the breakdown of the immune system will be noted. We have 3 cards left and this chapter's over. As the destruction of the ionosphere continues, more drastic effects will be observed. Oh God. For example, as these undetected particles of mass and energy are accepted at the poles and elsewhere, they will undoubtedly result in an increase in the energy exchange of our planet. This will cause an increase in the rotation rate of the Earth. At first, this increase will be considered a negligible factor, but the increase will be progressive and will eventually result in the Earth changing its orbit. The ecliptic will increase, and the Earth will begin its drift away from the sun. That sounds like an ice age to me. The increase in energy exchange will also heat up the interior of our planet, resulting in great internal pressure. This pressure will be released in the form of great earthquakes and increasing greater volcanic actions. The end result of these actions will be great continental shifts, and areas lying along existing fault lines will be at great risk. This increase in energy exchange will also cause a warming of the Earth's surface, and the polar ice caps will begin to melt. Coastline areas will begin to disappear. This is the last card. I want to say one last thing. When you spread the truth, you take on the role of teacher. And some of these things require explanation. If you approach someone who owns a house right on the ocean, and you say, what would you do if I told you that this shoreline is going to come back and it's going to put your land underwater? Well, that person would be threatened by that. And he might ask, if he's wise enough, how would that process take place? And teaching him about nuclear science here is a challenging task. But reading this book is easy. So I choose to read the book and add my comments. And all you have to do as the listener is get that into someone's hands by any method you find appropriate. Posting on blogs a link to the video is one way. And it can be approached from a high interest area like aliens or UFOs, because people are intrigued by flying saucers and creatures from other planets. And by putting up that flag, you can attract a whole lot of attention to what you're doing. I will read the last card of Chapter 5. Much more could be said, but this outline of events will give the reader a fair idea of why we say the situation on Earth is critical. To date, the focus of the anti-nuclear movement has been to eliminate bombs and testing, control radioactive wastes, etc. Now I want to tell all the soldiers and all the families of the soldiers, handling depleted uranium is wrong. And the government has you guys do that in the military, and they don't care what happens to you. When your lymph glands swell up because your body is dying, they put you off. And the military cemeteries are full of soldiers who have died as a result of handling depleted uranium. And I have shown on my channel the deformities of Iraqi children because depleted uranium is left, it's dumped in Iraq. And this is wrong, and everybody should know about it. And everyone who knows about it has a duty to pass it on. If you hear it from one person and you pass it on to 5 others, look at the effects. In 10 or 20 generations, everybody on Earth knows about this. This is vital information that must be spread. Next sentence. Few people have considered that perhaps the splitting of atoms and the fusion of atoms in itself is anti-nature. Unless it is stopped and decontamination procedures initiated, our future is bleak. The problems will not go away by themselves. Humankind has done the damage, and now we must repair it. And I say, if we don't understand it, neither is possible. I don't believe that we discovered this nuclear stuff by ourselves. We were given this in order to destroy us, because they gave us part of the information and they knew what we would do with it. They knew we would see it as a bomb and use it, and we did on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They knew we would see it as free energy, almost, and that we would make nuclear power plants, and we did, and we put them all over the earth, and we put them in unsafe places. And the leaders who led this made a killing from it. They made a lot of profit because they handled all of the contracts, like the mafia taking control. And they sold out the human race. And this naive statement that Wendell Stevens says, humankind has done the damage and now we must repair it. We didn't have the capability of doing the damage. We were given half of the information and we went with it. And now we don't have the ability to repair it. Those who want this planet do. And they already told us, you'll destroy yourselves and then we'll take over. We could easily clean up the mess. Last sentence in chapter 5. The technology now exists which will provide the tools, but our group cannot do it alone. We seek allies. Proceed now to chapter 6. It's already done. It was done first, and it's ready for your reading pleasure. Thanks for watching. This is chapter 7, part 2. I went into the clump of trees, remembering mentally that over there was where I had seen a clearing. I reached it at about 20:10, 10 minutes after 8 p.m. I was 10 minutes late and worried about this. I still had the sphere in my hands, and I looked around me, but didn't see anything unusual. I looked up and saw only branches and leaves. Then I heard something like a distant boat motor, which was lost in the distance. I waited in the woods as the minutes passed, terribly slowly. I looked at my watch, and it was now 20:15. I thought, dear God, what is going to happen? Protect me in any case. I began to feel fear. It gave me a sincere fright. There I was, representing all the people who were praying for me and thinking of backing out. I decided I would not give up. At 20:25, I began to hear a tremendous noise. I was in the woods and could not tell where it was coming from. Suddenly the whole area was illuminated brilliantly. 2 huge craft approached and passed directly over me. They came streaming water as if they had come from the bottom of the lake. Water cascaded from the sides like from a submarine when it surfaces. I waited breathless as I watched. They flew over me and the whole area warmed up from the heat. They must have put out a tremendous amount of energy. These craft were flattened disc forms, and underneath I could see something that rotated. And below that I saw 3 large white round parts that turned slowly, and a colored light came out. These giant objects, such tremendous spectacle, gave me new cause for alarm. And then it fell silent. I could only hear a very low sound dying down. They hung there in the sky, about 100 meters between the two, as best I could calculate. These objects were shaped like huge soup plates, joined at the rims. They were about 45 meters in diameter, and about 12 meters from top to bottom. I could see the cupola on top very clearly. The light slowly dimmed down, leaving only a small bright light source illuminated. It lighted only the area directly under the craft. Then one of the ships began to approach. The other remained quietly in place. It gave me a new fright to see this tremendous monster so close, and then it stopped, suspended above the small stream there, and 2 lateral beams of light came on. These new beams shined down, and I saw 2 beings descending in them as in an elevator. Wow, a beam of light elevator. In their descent they disappeared behind the trees from my position, and I couldn't see them land. Then I heard their steps as they approached. At this moment all of the lights on the spacecraft went out, and they remained completely silent. After seeing the tremendous luminosity, bright as day, I couldn't see anything when the light went out. And then I heard the steps of the beings, and then I saw them at 10 meters away. They approached, separated, one from the other. They wore helmets and suits that seemed very fitted, and I could see them clearly as they neared me. Then I heard the first telepathic communication. "Brother, we are here, do not fear." Ooh. "We are your friends." They tried to coordinate my ideas and thought. "Yes, why not? I am not afraid." He peed his pants, that's all. Then I heard the voice say, "I am your friend, Enrique. Do not be afraid." I shook my head. not afraid. I could see that they were tall, more than 1.70 meters in stature. That's not very tall. When they came up to within 2 meters of me, he said, "I am your friend, do not be afraid." I said, "Yes." And the other said, "If you are not ready, we can suspend this until another day. If you are not afraid, we can continue this contact, and we may ascend aboard." Oh boy. I said I was ready, and I took a step forward so that they could see that I had lost my fear. They noticed that I was a little wary, and one of them took me by the hand and the other by my shoulder and said, "Walk with us up to the light." We went a few meters forward, and one of them said, "Straight ahead, you feel a little worry in your head and in your body, but nothing is going to happen to you." The other said, "Brother Enrique, we guarantee it. We do not want to cause you any harm." And then they ate him. "Moreover, if you are still afraid, you may return, and we will prepare this for another day." I could not see their faces for the helmets. I asked if the helmets had visors, and a form of visor raised a little in front of one, showing the nose and mouth, but partly covering the mouth, which had a rectangular shape. I could not see the Mameluco spacesuit well because of the dark, and I could not see up to now exactly what color they were. Then they stopped me and said they could sense a little worry. He was terrified. At that moment, the spacecraft came forward and flashed a ray of light. I felt tremendous thrills and some twitching in all the skin of my head, like needles pricking me. I stood erect and began to ascend. When I saw that I was leaving the trees below, I thought, what if I should fall? I continued to ascend like in an elevator. I was surrounded by a yellowish light. It gave me the impression of being solid. I tried to touch it with my hands, and it felt solid like crystal. It must have been only energy because I did not see crystal. I didn't see anything. But when I touched the light, it felt solid. I felt a thump, and then a port began to open. And there it was, fully open, and I was inside, and it closed. A moment later, the other two entered, removed their helmet, and smiled. They had taken their helmets off so I could see their faces. They asked me for the sphere, which I gave them. And then they said, "Wait here. Take off your clothes." And I took everything off. They opened an automatic port, and we entered. Then they opened a side port like a window and looked at me smiling. I don't like to get naked in front of aliens. I heard a voice say, "Don't be afraid, we're going to enter a little smoke, but this is necessary. Do not be afraid." In spite of their assurances, I associated this immediately with the Nazis gassing the Jews. Wow. I did not see where the smoke came from, but it came in and it smelled like lemon. It only lasted a minute and was then drawn out through some rectangular openings in the wall and disappeared. Then I noticed that there was no shadow from my body anywhere, and I thought, where's the light coming from? I could not see any lamps. Then they gave me my clothes, which I put on, leaving the ruana and sombrero aside. They opened a door and said, "Now you may proceed." They explained that the process was simply to disinfect everything from whatever microbes we may have brought from the Earth's surface. I went into the first compartment that they opened, and there were 4 persons seated there, waiting for me. I came to the first one, and he said, "Enrique, how are you?" and gave me his hand. He gave me his hand like we shake hands and said, "How are you, brother?" "I am going to shake your hand," said another. This, indicating the first, is the commander. He said his name was what sounded like Kramish. I gave him my hand, and he gave me some thumps on it. The rest greeted me this way also. The only one who did not give me his hand was the first, who had said, "Brother Enrique." He now turned to me and said, "I am Cyril." I said, "How are you, Cyril?" And he said, "Cyril Weiss. Remember in 1969 in Caracas, Venezuela, at the entrance to the theater when we met?" And I said, "Cyril Weiss. "Oh, Cyril Weiss, but you are a little changed. And what are you doing here?" And he said, "I am one of the crew of this ship." I was terribly surprised. He said, "We have been in contact with you for 8 years." I understood now why they had given me their hands like Terrans. Then he presented me to the others. There was one by the name of Kremakan, and another named Krulula and Krenza. And then he told me that his name was not Cyril, but Krishnamurk. The name sounded Hindu. They all spoke telepathically except the one who spoke first, who articulated words to me in perfect Spanish. They seated me there at a table, as of crystal, with seats of material like plastic, with a leather-like finish. The beings were all dressed alike, except they had 2 types of suits. Some wore a silver-colored outfit, and the others had suits of a Coca-Cola color. There were others who had similar suits in a dark gray color, with orange gauntlets and orange boots. Flashy dressers. One of them took off his gauntlet so I could see his hands, which were perfectly formed. Their faces were beautiful and without blemishes and imperfections, but clean like a child. Their hair was long, coming almost to their shoulders. Kramakan told me that he is the commander of that ship and that there are 12 crew members. They are making contacts in order to divulge to them clearly what is going to happen on this earth. I asked him what kind of contacts, and he said, "Men like you." He didn't say more on this, and I did not pursue the subject further. I then asked him if they had women aboard, and he said, "Yes, we have women with us, but at the moment we will not see them." Then I remembered that he could read my thoughts before I asked the question, and knew I was going to ask it before I even formed the words. We began with the first questions. I had brought many questions given to me by the study group. Almost all of them were of a religious nature. I did not want to ask those at this time. I began by asking them where they were going to get their contacts and why they had chosen me. They told me that my name was not really Enrique. Ooh. They told me another name, which I still have revealed to nobody. Heathcliff, maybe? I am waiting to see what develops in all of this first. I got the impression that they knew something about previous incarnations of mine for some reason. I asked then where they came from, and they replied, the Pleiades. I asked them, where are the Pleiades? And they said, it is what you call the 7 sisters. And then I remembered that it is a small constellation having 7 bright stars. I asked them how far it was from here, and they said, you say that it is more than 328 light years from here, which is not true. It's much farther. So I asked them, how did you make the trip? Perhaps I was asking them infantile questions, but for me they were important. How did you make such a long trip? They answered, do you know anything about relativity? They told me that Albert Einstein's theory was not complete, that we are going to have to make 3 corrections, that the velocity of light is not in fact 300,000 kilometers per second as we believe, but much more. And they went on to explain details that I could not follow. Well, is it written down anywhere? I'd like to read it. Maybe I can follow it. Then they told me there is another measure of time unknown to us, in which we cannot remain long in physical bodies. I did not pursue this further after that. They took me to visit various rooms. I saw a room for meditation. They said it was where they rest and meditate. It was beautifully appointed, with tremendously exquisite brocades. Another room was a laboratory, where there were flasks of a green substance. I asked about this, and they said it was chlorophyll, which they had extracted from our trees, a substance vital to their own alimentary system, so they digest food with chlorophyll. They use it in preparing various food items. They had fruits also. They told me they ate much fruit from South America. They particularly liked the duraznos, peaches, and the melocotones, apricots. And they carried much fruit, corn, wheat, rice, and other vegetable substances. To compensate for what they had taken, they used an ionizing radiant beam that accelerated the life process of the plants and caused them to replace their fruit in a few hours. Wow. We got to get one of those. I wonder if the cattle mutilators were as considerate. I didn't quite understand this, that they could project a radiation that could accelerate the growth and maturity of the plants from which they had taken produce and cause it to be replaced in hours. This was incredible. Tell me about it. I began to understand another thing. They knew about biological engineering and could control the genetic codes by means of a process which they called consubstantiation. By this process, they could continue the life forces of a cell forever. Now, we have to get one of those. They told me they were there on a mission. They belonged to a brotherhood of civilizations with others from which they had received specific orders from our world. They pointed out that we have always been guided indirectly by certain great personalities who have passed through our civilizations throughout history. Those so-called masters, some approaching divinity, have always had contact with extraterrestrials. I had a feeling that these beings had been sent on a mission pertaining to the evolution of our planet. Then Kremakan, the commander, permitted me to visit the control room, where I saw great electronic maps on the wall. I saw the great panorama around us, through the green glass cupola. There were 3 men seated, and as we entered, they came over and greeted me, and then returned to the control panels of the craft. The control room was the 3rd level, under the dome on top of this craft. When I saw the maps, he took me to them and explained that they were cosmic maps. I could not understand them. I saw small lights. They moved a control, and I saw small lights like neon, in various colors, beginning to take form on the map panel. There were points of light and lines of light, and some of the lines were indefinite. Some of the greater points of light represented galaxies and nebulosities. They said that many thousands of inhabited planets are in contact with each other and exchange cultural, technological, and scientific information. We have to get in on that. Some are tremendously advanced in spiritual and scientific evolution. I asked which planets, and he said it would be needless to tell me, as the names would mean nothing to me anyway. He told me that where the lines between the lights were brighter, there was regular commerce. These dimmer ones were under exploration. The indefinite ones were lesser developed. They were on the map, but they lacked thousands of years of development before they were ready for contact. Now I'm curious, where do we fit in? When are we going to join in the fun? They do have a sense of time because they talked of millions of years, but I had difficulty coordinating this with their discussion of laws of relativity, where time changes. Also, they seem to be aware of the future time, because they told me we are going to experience a 3rd World War, and that they know exactly when it will start. I wish we could avert that, but we have crazy leaders. They desire that all men unite in one thought, to seek real peace for the whole planet, without distinction of race, creed, or color, that in the next few years we are going to make the greatest discovery in the history of the planet. The discovery of God, the final truth. But how is this possible, I said, if we already believe in God? Their answer was, you have never believed in God in a normal form. And I think I know what they meant. They called it a great unknowable, preferring to give the force no name. They told me that we have to distinguish between the inner and the outer forces. And I began to understand that we have searched for God outside, when in reality it is within, and that the kingdom of God is in every one of us. We must understand this first before we will live in peace and understanding with all men. They told me that they were in a way emissaries of beings superior to them, and that they had been the destroyers of Sodom and Gomorrah. This gave me a great sensation. I said, how can you be judges? How can you destroy a nation with thousands of people, including many innocents? They said, you cannot comprehend this now. We will try to explain. We were emissaries of forces superior to us that govern the cosmos. And when they give us an order, we carry it out. And in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, it was exactly that. They sent emissaries, they warned the people, and they refused to understand and would not believe that which was happening over their heads. The hour arrived, and it had to be destroyed. I thought, how could they be the judges? And I said that I could not understand, that I would not go into detail, but that I also could not understand. For me, it was not important to know at that time, because there were other things. They told me the time of the beginning of the Third World War, and told me that they had been the inspirers and the consultants on the building of the Great Pyramids, where they have placed many years of the Earth's history. In the future, we are going to discover 2 cities in South America where there are the records of the origin of the Earth's races and how they came here, how the history was written, and why it was done. Would that be Brazil? They told me the time of the beginning of World War III and said that we could delay that time 3 or 4 years and its intensity by a condition of heart, that mankind alone could do this because they are not permitted to interfere with nor restrict the freedom of action of a civilization such as is developing here. I understood what they meant quite clearly and didn't have to ask twice. They answered all my questions rapidly. Well, I don't think that's fair, that a very small number of people get control of an entire civilization and force innocent people to die in wars. We need to rise up against these people, and spreading the truth is the way to bring this to a head and stop this madness. World War III. It's got to be nuclear. It's going to destroy the planet, cause irreparable damage that will last for centuries, if not millennium. Now it seems he lost his fear. When I asked them if we could go someplace, they said, "We're already traveling. From the moment you entered the craft, we have been traveling." They took me to a special panel there, like a great telescope, which I was allowed to look through. And it gave me the strange impression that I had gone out there into space, which was very still. There was no feeling of acceleration. It felt like the aircraft was standing still and not moving at all. I didn't hear any sound, and I couldn't detect the least movement. They seated me in front of a panel, which they opened and said, "Here is your house." We seemed stationary, some 5,000 to 10,000 meters above it, and they focused it into the telescope device. They said it was an electronic device, but it had to be very advanced over any electronic telescope of ours because it could penetrate walls and metals, and I could see my family sleeping. I asked them if we could look at something else, and the craft, which had been hovering over my house, now began to move about, and I looked at the 2 great avenues in the city, and I saw the autos and the people in the streets. Time passed and we talked much. I looked at my watch and had to look again. It read 20:25, almost 8:30 p.m. Krishnamurk said, "Your watch is not going to function until you leave this craft," and he laughed. I asked him what caused this, and he said, "Precisely when you came within the field of this craft and energy force, it stopped. It may not work again." They must have a different notion of time from ours, because I did not see clocks of any kind aboard. He just smiled and dropped the subject. I did not want to bother him about how long I had been aboard, as it did not matter anyway. He told me things about all our religions, which at this time I do not want to divulge. He told me something about the Fatima letter, which they seemed to know all about. At that time I understood, though, and I understood also something that I had learned in a Mormon church, that hidden in the heart of all men are the great truths of all time, waiting to be awakened, and that this awakening must come from within. We talked about many other things that came to mind. They gave me a kind of chocolate bar sealed in plastic, which I opened and ate. Oh, he trusts them. It had a taste like sabajon, a kind of mild liquor sold in Colombia, and my hunger disappeared completely. And then he said, "We have something that we want to give you that is very important. My body began to warm all over. You're going to eat something very interesting, and which you will like very much. They brought me something like a large white corn taco and told me to eat it. I broke it and put some in my mouth. In a moment I felt a tremendous sensation and warm feeling. I thought at that moment that they were drugging me. I don't understand why the words Cyril and Krishnamurti are together. But Krishnamurti said, "Do you know what they call that? The Jews were fed on that for 40 years in the desert. The manna of the scriptures," I said. "No more, no less," was the reply. "You are eating manna, and you will not get hungry for 24 hours. It gives you tremendous energy. It is prepared for us." Then ideas began to rush into my head so fast I could not coordinate them. I thought of Elias and of Moses, and then I returned to the present. I felt like I was going crazy. They laughed and simply observed. We were one of those who helped the Jews. Our great ship was always camouflaged. They could be made invisible by a simple change of vibrational energy, right over the heads of the people, and they could not see them. I couldn't understand this then, and I can't today. I have a little more knowledge about it now, but I still do not completely understand. The public has asked many questions, and I have tried to answer, but I must confess my ignorance concerning a civilization so advanced as this, and they were trying to simplify everything as much as possible so that I could understand it better. After eating the substance, it made me sleepy, and they let me sleep about 3 hours. Then they came and awakened me. I was lying on a very comfortable bed, and where I had been lying I left the imprint of my body. "Pardon me, Enrique, you have awakened because we gave you a suggestion to awaken at this point. You are going to receive your last information, and it is time we left you in the place where we met you," a voice said. Kramakan had gone someplace and did not return. We circled the eastern plains, and they showed me a site that was illuminated like day. It was the site where we would next meet. "Look well and observe the highway. Here we will meet again on the 18th of this month at 8 o'clock in the evening." They lowered the ship and passed slowly so that I could see the place well. I saw that the highway was long and ran through the mountains. I tried to remember all I could of the place, thinking I may have to come here by horse. They took me back and left me in the exact place where they had picked me up. They bid me goodbye with a form of embrace. With Cyril Weiss, I always talked in Spanish. The others bid me goodbye with strokes on my shoulder. "We will see you," Cyril said, and I descended to the ground. They let me off about 5 o'clock in the morning. I slept a little and awakened and saw that my watch was running and indicated 11:15. I left the place running as fast as I could. I wanted to tell the whole world what had happened. The first person I met was a farmer leading a burro, and I said, "Pardon me, sir, what time is it?" He replied, "Almost 8. 8 in the morning, sir." I calculated that I had slept about 3 hours. When I cut the bus at the road, I wanted to tell everybody. I wanted to tell the whole world what I had just lived. And I wanted to embrace all men. I was happy. When I returned to the house I had left the night before, I found some 60 people waiting for me. I met with the man who had made the telepathic contacts and began to give him the first information about the experience. I told him about the war and its timing, and the great destruction, and the great religious power around the earth, and the years that remained of normal life. Nobody believed me, of course. They thought I was attacking religion and society for some reason of my own. I did not say much more then, nor ever in public, because I could see that it would cause confusion and possibly even harm. Could you just tell us the date of the war? I could only hope that someday all men would arrive at an understanding of the things I had just been shown. That is all that I can say about that first contact now. Comments from Wendell Stevens, the book's author. This was amazing. Enrique Carlos Rincon had received almost the same information from Pleiadians as was outlined to Edward Meyer in Switzerland by other Pleiadians, only a little over a year later. The philosophy expressed and the criticism of our world deficiencies was almost identical, yet nothing had been released out of the Bogota group until sometime after the Swiss contacts began. Even more astounding was the receptivity of the UFO community over these momentous events, unfolding before their very eyes. An international UFO Congress was gathered in Acapulco in 1978. That's the year I went there. The Yankees won the World Series that year, to assess the world UFO situation up to that time. It was well organized and well attended. One of the featured speakers at that Congress was Enrique Carlos Rincon, who very briefly described his contacts with Pleiadian ETs. His lecture was coolly received and politely put down by all the experts there, presumably because it had happened to him and not them. Jim Lawrenson of APRO, one of the stronger advocates of contactee phenomena at a time when most other clubs were throwing them out, sat next to Rincon at the speaker's table for 3 full days and never asked for more details on Rincon's contact experiences, and never published anything on Rincon's report, although I had by that time briefed him on what I found happening in Switzerland. He didn't believe me, and he didn't believe Rincon. I never told him about any of the other Pleiadian cases I was encountering. He still refuses to accept any validity to any Pleiadian contact case. Open-minded. It was after that I discovered the Akaya contacts going on in Peru and learned that Pleiadian ETs were discussing almost the same spiritual philosophies and scenario of events concerning our world, and that Witness was unaware of the other two, and they of him and his contacts. I knew nothing then of the Pleiadian contacts going on with Pedro Romaniuk in Argentina, or others with Devereux in Arkansas, here in the USA, and again the philosophies and scenario of events was very similar. They all came under severe criticism for what they were revealing, and so they all began to hold back and release less and less to the world. That is the situation we are in today. Amazing indeed. The second meeting took place on the 18th of the same month as predicted, and I was gone 26 hours. And the knowledge that I gained was tremendous and very disturbing, and would completely fill a book by itself. There is much information that I cannot tell anyone, not even my friends, in this experience. I had gone to the place at the appointed time. It was Eastern Colombia. The circumstances of this meeting were a little different. I arrived 15 minutes early, by horse, with a guide whom I paid 120 pesos. He left me at the designated place, but was disturbed leaving me in the jungle alone at night. "They will pick me up here in a jeep," I said. "Ah, you're going to the ranch of the Fulanos de Tal," he said, and I answered, "Precisely, that is where I'm going." "No, I'm going on a spaceship with some aliens." "Really? De veras? But at these hours it is very dangerous here. There are tigers about." "Do not worry about me," I said. "Go in peace." I paid him, and he departed on his horse and left me there. And a tiger ate me. The meeting did not take place at 8 o'clock in the evening as indicated, but more like 3 o'clock in the morning. I walked 50 meters in this direction and 50 meters in that, but I did not leave the site. I kept looking in the clear and cloudless sky and waited until 3 o'clock, when suddenly 13 spacecraft of Venus types arrived. Only one small descended and landed on 3 shoes. Krishnamurk, disembarking, saying, "Brother, here." He told me to wait a minute, and then he said, "Now come on, enter." And I did as invited. Inside there were 2 small beings, and they were not like those of the Pleiades. Meanwhile, back on the ground, a search party was dispatched to find the guy who was eaten by the tiger. They must know different races. He told me that those did not come from the Pleiades, but from Mercury, and they took me in that small craft. The small craft sat on 3 legs and had a diameter of 4 to 5 meters, and was no more than 2 meters 20 high. It had 2 levels inside. We now entered through a cabin that had a metal stair, like in submarines, that went to the upper level, which was the control room. I did not see much of the ship, as they transported us to a mothership almost immediately. This card is really incredible. I did not want to ask why such a long wait, though I was thinking that I could have been attacked by a snake or a tiger. If I had been bitten by one of the poisonous snakes, where could I go in the 5 minutes I would have to do something? The same with the tiger. Then I remembered that I had not been bitten by even a mosquito. An impossibility, unless the zone was protected in some way. Then I thought that the reason for the long delay may have been a test of my patience. They did not tell me this, but I had the feeling that they had tested me to see how long my patience would last. I was happy that I had passed their test. They opened the port and lowered the ladder, and we left the ship. They explained that the 2 strange craft, very different from the others, with a bow structure something like a great whale, were relieving the smog and air pollution of Bogota. Nice. I saw another with a similar bow structure, and they said a ship like that was the whale that swallowed Jonah. These points of scripture kept coming up, and I thought, these extraterrestrials have certainly had contact with many of our prophets. This may lead us to a new concept of cosmic theology, as I told the Congress of Witchcraft, where mankind may become truly united with the superior entities, which we shall proudly call brothers, when we ascend to that understanding, when we make contact with these intelligences en masse. They did not let me off in the same place as they had picked me up this time. They left me much closer and near the highway. I asked them why they did not make contact with more people and with governments, and they said I would have an experience that would show me one reason why they were not doing this. It was getting daylight and must have been around 5:30 in the morning when they brought me in the small craft with the 3 crew members to let me off. In the farms of the plains, many people get up early to feed their animals and milk cows. The small craft made a circle over some people below. There were 2 men milking cows in a small shed behind a house. They saw the bright light and jumped up. The cow kicked one and also knocked over the pail of milk, and both men ran like they had seen the devil. We shot up rapidly behind some clouds where they couldn't see us. Then the farmer came out, and the 2 men pointed up, moving their arms excitedly. A woman came out, drying her hands, and a child of about 8 years old. And they all looked up, but couldn't see anything. We were still in the cloud. "Observe their reaction," said one. "Yes, no need to explain. We have caused a panic." "But these people are farmers," I said. "Now we will try an experiment with slightly different people," the ET said. As we flew to the highway, where we saw a truckload of cattle approaching, we let it pass on. Behind it was a jeep, which we also let pass. Then came a pickup and an automobile, very close together, 100 to 120 meters apart. We let them pass. There comes a car alone. There is no other within kilometers, the ET said. We took a position above and held so that I could see. I could see through an electronic apparatus, which they had, that inside the auto were 2 men with suit coats and soft ties. One was driving while the other sat at his side talking. In the rear seat, another man had his collar turned up and was sleeping. The gentlemen seemed to be cultured, middle-class people from their dress and the appearance of their car. We descended in front and hovered alongside the road. They were so surprised to see us, so unexpectedly, that the 2 men in the front opened their doors to exit running. This doesn't prove anything except that when people are isolated, that they panic. That's true. Especially if you see something in the sky and you feel like you're the only one that sees it, you feel a little bit afraid. But if you go on national television and you speak and everyone becomes aware that aliens exist, and now it's universally accepted, then all that scare is gone. And aliens ought to know that. This is baloney. The other, knowing nothing of what was taking place, fell off the seat when the driver hit the brakes. He stuck his head out the window and yelled something because I saw his mouth open. When he saw our craft parked above and to the side, he got out running and tore his coat trying to scramble through a barbed wire fence. That is the reaction of everyone, said my companion. Do you think that answers the question? Brothers, I said, though I know that I am with you, and this is the second time we have met, and knowing that you are living beings much advanced in evolution, there are many things which I still do not understand. I hope that in time I may be able to do so. I feel very honored and considerably humbled. They continued giving me information up to the last experience in Peru. New meeting. That took place on the 25th of July, 1974, when Guadalupe and Montserrat, professed spacemen, met me in Bogota. It was about 5 in the morning, and I spent 45 minutes in a spacecraft talking to them. We remained on the ground in the spacecraft and did not fly. This craft rested on 3 feet and was one of the Adamski type, but much smaller. It was not very big. This craft could not have been more than 9 meters in diameter and no more than 2 meters 80 in height. Those spacemen that I saw then were no more than 1.5 meters tall. All of them were alike, light-colored, and looked much like those of the Pleiades, but smaller. I have seen others from Orion, Orton, Yamura, Yanaka, Yaraka, and other places. I never heard of any of them, except Orion. Some of them also had no women with them. That's because they like Earth chicks. In the second encounter on the 18th of November, I saw 2 women, and very beautiful they were for a few minutes. They were only beautiful for a few minutes. Oh gosh, this writer is so funny. In the second encounter of the 18th of November, I saw 2 women for a few minutes. They were very beautiful. And I saw at that time on the mother craft a very strange being. I could not tell whether it was human or an automation, but they permitted me to see it. When I was walking with them in the ship, an automatic port opened, and one of them passed by. It had a large head like a basketball, and a transparent case. I thought I could see the brains, and the veins, and the organs, and the eyes were large, and moved like those of an iguana, and could look on all sides. It walked like it was a robot, with a thin gray uniform and boots and gauntlets of a dark blue, and some colored buttons at the waist, which was thin like a woman. Not all women. Which, with their broad shoulders, gave them a triangular aspect. The door opened, there was a light, and it entered. We all turned to look as I continued talking to them. I did not ask about it. For the first time I saw a kind of symbol on its back, at the shoulder. Up to this time I had not seen any kind of mark or symbol. This was the first I had seen, and it was very strange. I had tried to draw the symbol since then, but I have forgotten one of the upper parts. It was a kind of an H, but it had something else above it, and I can't remember what it was. I had the feeling that they had let me see this creature to know that such did exist. I saw also a gigantic being of 2 meters 80, whom they told me was Jovian. He never spoke to me. He always kept his hands crossed. He watched me with a smile the whole time and never said a single word. He seemed to understand all. A strange thing happened with my ballpoint pen. I took out my pen to sketch the solar system for a question that had come from an anonymous letter delivered to the newspaper El Tiempo of Bogota. The writer had allegedly made contact with beings that looked like Hindus. who operated a flying saucer. They told him that they came from a planet similar to Earth, that it was Earth's twin, and occupied the same orbit but on the opposite side of the sun, for which we never saw it. I wanted to ask if there was such a possibility, and I took out my pen and paper to sketch the orbit and see if I could make them understand. When I produced the pen, they all displayed great curiosity, especially the Jovian. Krishnamurk told me to let him see it. He took it apart and examined it and then gave it back. I asked him why the pen was of such interest, and Krishnamurk said, "It is because we have one very similar, but you must see it." And they produced one fastened to a line to the table, so nobody steals it. "Write something. Here are papers." I took the pages, which were almost transparent, and paused over them. "Write what you like. Make a sketch." Then this happened. They asked me if I could paint the house where I lived as a child, if I could remember it, and I said yes. "But paint it." "I can't even draw it," I said. "Make anything." I said, "I painted a butterfly when I was a little boy in school." And they said, "Do that then." So I began pressing the point, which was finer than ours, but the moment I pressed the button, the pen began to vibrate in my hand. And I heard a small sound and felt a slight vibration, but the most surprising thing came the moment I began drawing the butterfly. It came out in relief and in exact colors. I stared, but how is this possible? And they laughed and explained, "Whatever you have in your mind is captured and sketched exactly as you think it, in colors, and in exact scale and size. This apparatus captures exactly the vibration, the color, the size of what you think, and produces it accurately." Amazing. Amazing. We have to get some of those. The apparatus receives the vital image and translates it then into a sketch. I was stupefied, and then I understood their interest in my pen, which looked similar. After that, on the 24th and 25th of December 1974, they took me to an energy vortices in the Andes. I was in Caracas, attending a conference, when they contacted and arranged a meeting. I boarded the spacecraft between two small villages near Caracas. One is called El Huiquito, and the other, where many Germans live, is called Colonia Tovar. Colonia means neighborhood. I don't know what a Huiquito is. From there they took me to the vortice 5 minutes. It was in the uplands of Peru, at 4,200 meters altitude. Well, that's got to be 13,000 feet, between Marcahuasi and Machu Picchu. These beings have submarine bases in Lake Titicaca under the seas. I was taken to one of the bases in the Mariana Trench. That's the deepest ocean in the world. You have to be kidding me. I'm writing a science fiction story to be able to detail what is going on in the marine depths. Why science fiction? Nobody's going to believe it. They're going to think it's science fiction. By some manner, I'm going to give this information to the world. By science fiction? And I believe the time has come, and we are going to make, together with others in Venezuela, kind of census of the public, of their opinions concerning flying saucers. Well, more than half now believe in them, so it's time to forget about science fiction, bring this forward as truth, personal testimony, and let's give it to the world directly. If they accept them, we want to know why. If they do not accept them, we also want to know why. This will serve to measure the information that can be released of that which we have. Little by little, we hope to give this information to the world, as much as it can accept, to prepare them for the day when they shall also experience the UFOs, hoping that they will not panic, and that they will be a little bit prepared for what will happen. One may look around and see that we have availed ourselves of little of the vast amount of knowledge and experience we could have enjoyed. I like that pen. Even this little was too much for many, and for most of the UFO clubs. Boy, what a broad-minded group they are. Witness the treatment any contactee gets once he decides to reveal even a little of what is happening to him. He would be better off to have said nothing and to avail himself to these experiences in silence, which is exactly what most of them do after their first experience with the public. We may state that these experiences have gone on for years, and the descriptions and the dialogue up to now would fill volumes. The undersea base in the Pacific alone would take a whole volume to describe. There's one reason why we don't know this stuff, and that's leaders. Leaders who lead us astray. Leaders who lead us to failure, not victory. We need to become part of the galactic community and exchange technology. I want that pen. We have undertaken the task of translating Enrique Castillo Rincon's full report on his contacts from the original Spanish to English for your enlightenment. Our work title for that report is UFO Contact from Cielo, the name which they called their home sun, somewhere in what we call the Pleiades. Well, I have heard that most Pleiadians are not from the Pleiades. They're from a star system 80 light years past the Pleiades. But we are more familiar with the Pleiades, and that's the general direction. Maybe that's why they allow us to call them people from the Pleiades. El Tocuyo, Venezuela. During 1977 to 1979, before moving from Venezuela to Puerto Rico, Ramon Rosa Alvarado had a series of unique experiences as an observer in a local Venezuelan UFO group, which was being contacted by UFO nauts who told the local contactee there that they came from the Pleiades. At that time, Alvarado and his wife were living near Ciudad El Tocuyo, Distrito Morán, Venezuela, in a sugarcane growing district. Reports of strange disc-shaped aerial objects were occurring almost every night. They would be seen approaching from below the crest of a small, sparsely vegetated mountain above the sugarcane field, and would fly about in the sky in all directions in a random fashion. Word had gotten out about the almost nightly visits, and people from all around began coming to the area to witness the phenomenon. You see? People are not afraid. They're coming to see it. They just want to know in advance that it's an alien ship, and then they come to see it. Maybe they're scared when they get there, but they're coming to see it. Does that tell you anything? One night around 8 p.m., Alvarado and his wife watched many different colored, glowing objects of luminous disc form flying shelter over the cornfields. I don't know what that means, flying shelter over the cornfields. They were of blue, green, and amber radiance, and were estimated to be 15 to 20 feet in diameter. Feet or meters? Ramon counted 25 such craft on this occasion. Some of them approached quite closely, and some hovered lowly over the cane tops, that's sugar cane tops, and in other places only a couple of feet above the ground. The upper level of these operations was only about 400 to 500 feet above the ground surface. On this particular night, the witnesses saw a large number of shiny silver metallic balls, non-luminous but highly reflective, also flying around in the dark sky. What are they reflecting in the dark sky? Though these spheres were not luminous, they could nevertheless be easily seen in the light of the other disc-shaped UFOs. Oh. The balls reflected the many lights of the larger craft flying about. There may have been as many as several dozen such shiny balls, only a few inches to a few feet in diameter in several sizes. These silver balls kept moving rapidly and did not stop and hover like the luminous disc-shaped larger craft. Well, that's a weird sight. On another night, a few weeks later, Ramon and his wife joined a group of about 80 people who had come to witness the phenomenon. It was a Wednesday evening. The objects seemed to be most active in midweek. That's because aliens have the weekends off. And they had seen the lights below the top of the large hill. Suddenly they saw 3 of the blue and green 15 to 20 foot diameter glowing disc-shaped flying objects, about 400 to 500 meters to the north of their position. The objects were situated, one over the river to the north near the left road, another to the right of dead center between the two roads, and a third over the cornfield across the road to the right. As one of the witnesses started down the road to the left with a jeep to get closer, the one to the far right began to approach up the right road. Alvarado and his wife were standing to the right, and the light came slowly toward them. Suddenly a ball of white light, about 1 meter in diameter, burst into view in front of them and began to fly a tight vertical circle about 12 to 15 meters in diameter, only a few feet away. Why does he keep mixing up the units, meters and feet? Mrs. Alvarado fainted from fright. Then a much larger round glow of light came on in the distance, across the river toward the hill. It must have been huge because all of the disc-shaped craft and the white ball of light raced toward it and went inside, and the whole thing rose and flew away as one object. Before they departed, however, the disc-shaped luminous craft on the right that was approaching up the road stopped, and an array of horizontal light beams of several colors, including blue, green, violet, amber, and orange, came on top of the object and radiated out horizontally. Then they began to rotate like helicopter blades in a counterclockwise direction, looking up or looking down. Anyway, these light beams blinked out before this object went toward the larger light in the distance and went into it. There was a principal witness in that vicinity whom these alien visitors picked up and contacted directly. They addressed the contactee in his native Spanish, but they conversed among themselves in another language. When he asked what language it was, they called it Urdu. They said it was a Proto-Sumerian tongue used long ago on Earth by their predecessors here, and that most other languages used on Earth today were derived from it. They said that their ancestors came from what we call the Pleiades. The space beings said that they lived lifespans of 1,000 to 1,200 years of our time in a single physical embodiment. Oh, Methuselah died young. They said that they lived simultaneously in the 3 dimensions we normally think of, plus a 4th dimension we know very little about at the present time. They said that the laws of the 4th dimension are entirely different, and that the speed of light in our dimension does not apply in the physics there. They said that they simply shift all matter up to the 4th dimensional state, and the laws of time and space change. They have offered scores of detailed descriptions on very scientific subjects, including other dimensions and other beings. Alvarado estimated the contact notes and the dialogue he has seen amounted to several hundred pages. I want to see this. I was wondering how they were able to travel 328 light years in the blink of an eye. These Pleiadians, like those visiting Switzerland, also describe 2 other planets in our solar system not familiar to us today. They called one of them Nemus and the other Sirius. These are our spellings from the phonetics used. They said that these planets will be found in orbits between what we call Neptune and Pluto. How could that be? Pluto sometimes is inside the orbit of Neptune. The visitors to Switzerland said they were both beyond the orbit of Pluto. The visitors to Achaia said that one was inside and the other one outside the orbit of Pluto. We are unable to account for these disparities. However, the fact that all spoke of only 2 may be significant. They all mentioned undiscovered moons for the subsuns Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and they have now been proved to be correct in 3 out of 4, and 1 still to be surveyed by close observation. They all said that there were many inhabited planets in the vast Pleiades systems. They were all aware of other human and non-human visitors to our planet at this time, and each was in active contact with some of those others. This is the last card for Chapter 7. A friend of one of the sugar farmers, Guillermo Torres, of Hacienda Las Cruz, near Ciudad El Tucoyo, successfully photographed one of the larger ships visiting this locality. It is seen as a large lens-shaped circular craft with a wide, low-profile, transparent, translucent dome on top. It occasionally radiates light from the rim, and some of this light is seen in the photograph. The skin surface of the craft seems to be matte gray in color and has a brushed metal finish. Two craft were an estimated 400 meters away when the picture was made. They all operated, used or shared bases of limited accessibility in high mountain peaks and in equally inaccessible underwater locations. This is the end of Chapter 7.